Welcome to Behavioral Grooves. My name is Kurt Nelson.
I'm Tim Houlihan. Behavioral Grooves is the podcast that bakes up the why we do what we do streusel and serves it with a cup of what's on your playlist espresso.
Okay, really? Our branding now is cake and coffee?
I'm just trying to keep things fresh.
Fresh. Okay. Food fresh. There we go. All right. How about this? Behavioral Grooves delivers great conversations with researchers, authors, and practitioners so listeners can apply great insights to their work and life. How's that for branding? Is that better?
Well, that's really good. I'm just hungry.
You need to eat breakfast before we do these. Come on. All right, Groovers, back on track. This week is the second in our series of episodes with two guests, and we couldn't be happier to share our conversation with these two who we have become more than just guests with since we met. They're good friends and colleagues, and we really appreciate their work.
Yeah, and their book. And we want to start by introducing the first of our guests, which is Jez Groom. And Jez is the founder of Cowry Consulting in London, and he has established himself as one of the world's leading practitioners in the field. Just a side note on this, that Kurt and I worked with Jez to co-found an organization called Diversify. And Diversify is the largest collaborative network of applied behavioral science practitioners in the world, comprising of over 180 experts working for 13 organizations globally, and we're growing. So just a little plug there. But as a pioneer, getting back to Jez, he has played instrumental roles in projects like Babies in the Borough, which we featured in episode 167, that use the murals of baby faces to fight crime, to changing hand-washing behaviors in a pig abattoir in Santiago, to painting pink walls to reduce unsafe behavior on a construction site in London. He's done some fabulous stuff, but he is also an Honorary Research Fellow at the Department of Psychology at City University in London.
And April Vellacott is the behavioral consulting lead at Cowry. Aside from being a dedicated and experienced practitioner, she holds degrees in psychology and behavior change. Together, April and Jez wrote an insightful book of case studies in behavioral science called Ripple: The Big Effects of Small Behavior Changes in Business. We urge you to go and check it out, as it is not just informative, but it is really a pleasure to read. Really, really go out and buy this.
In our conversation with Jez and April, we talked about the salient points from the book and about some of the techniques they've used to get business professionals to adopt behavioral science.
We also covered a key pillar from their personal and professional missions: to demystify and democratize behavioral science. It's a terrific conversation, and we hope you'll enjoy it as much as we did in having it.
We also would like to remind you that Apple's recommendation algorithms incorporate ratings and reviews into them. And that means that your rating or review could go a long way to help other people learn about behavioral grooves. People you don't even know.
People that might live across the world from you, okay? With that is one of the things that we just wanted to make sure you understood. Okay. So with that, relax a bit and grab a snack of demystifying behavioral science while you listen to our conversation with Jez and April.
Jez Groom and April Vellacott, welcome to Behavioral Grooves.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, we are excited as always. Ripple was a fantastic book, and we were excited to talk a little bit more about it. But before we get to that, we always start with a speed round. So we have both of you here, so we're going to ask you both to answer these questions. But April, you're gonna be on the line first here as we go. So, dinner with your favorite musician or your favorite sports player, which would you prefer?
Oh, it's definitely got to be a musician. I'm afraid I'm not a sports gal. Should I specify the musician? I don't know.
Yeah, which musician would this be?
I really love following John Legend on Instagram. Oh. He's got a good personality, so maybe him.
He would be probably a good person to have dinner with, I think.
Yeah, he's got a good chat.
Yeah.
And he makes good food.
Yeah, there you
Oh.
go. Wasn't he the most beautiful man in the world or something like that? Didn't he just win that award last year or 2 years
I
ago,
mean,
something like that?
whatever you say, yeah.
Yeah, Kurt's got a soft spot, I think.
Yeah, there you go.
Jez, how about you? What's your thought about?
So it'd be sports person, and I think like most of the population in lockdown, I've watched the Last Dance, and I think Michael Jordan for me is just awesome. And one of my colleagues said, "You remind me a lot of Michael Jordan."
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. And I reflected, going, "I'm 5'5" from the northwest of England. And I've
Pretty similar.
Yeah, but I think yeah, it was more around the point of creating sort of mini battles sometimes which aren't completely true. So battles with yourself and setting challenges of things that maybe your own interpretation of the truth. So yeah, I think that would be fair.
Okay. Second speed round question. We're blazing our way through this. April, would you prefer to be expert in a new language or expert in a new instrument?
Oh, really interesting one. Okay. I think expert in a new instrument, but I don't know if I can put my finger on why. I mean, a language would be more useful, but I think as a vanity project and also to have a party trick, I think I'd rather be expert in a new instrument.
All right. Any idea of what that instrument might be?
I think maybe something that's readily available around people's houses. So maybe a piano. I can give it a tinkle when I'm around John Legend's house.
There you go. Have dinner with John at his
Nice
house.
tie.
Play the piano. Nicely
Nice
done.
tie.
All right,
Yeah.
Jez, your turn.
Yeah, I think a new language, but maybe slightly sort of different one. It's my wife. I mean, I consider myself to be quite good at behavioral science, but the language my wife uses to get me to do things is just immense, and I don't know how she does it. So, you know, do you think the kitchen might look better a bit like that? You know, is okay. I will paint the kitchen next week. It's just, yeah, she's pretty immense. She's the best, the best nudger. So yeah,
So
if I
it sounds like
understand.
she sounds like a behavioral scientist.
Oh, yeah,
Nudging.
yeah, she's ahead of the curve. I think, yeah, there's a lot of people in the world, maybe just above half, have been ahead of the behavioral science curve for a long time.
All right. Well, third question. Travel with an explicit itinerary or with no itinerary at all? Now, this is granted that you can actually travel and we're not being stuck in quarantine here. But when you do get to travel, do you travel with an itinerary that you follow, or just go and whatever happens, happens? April?
That's a really easy one for me. It's definitely I've planned out every minute to a T. Yeah, I want to know exactly where I'm going, what train I'm getting on, where I'm staying. Yeah.
No, just backpack going through Asia, kind of like wherever it lands me.
I like the control.
All right.
Jez, how about you?
I think this is the reason why myself and April work very, very well together. And when we did our risk profiles, so we did some psychometrics, and yeah, we're opposite ends of the spectrum. So yeah, I'm definitely my risk profile was carefree and adventurous. And yeah, I particularly liked adventurous. Carefree suggests that sometimes a bit careless. And but yeah, I reflected about the first holiday I went on with my wife when I was 19, and we arrived in an airport, but we'd only planned out our journey on the flight together, which was only a 3-hour flight to Turkey, with a Lonely Planet book. If you remember those Lonely Planet books, we had that and we read that. And yeah, it was, yeah, I would say, I don't know if it's an American expression, definitely an English one or a British one, which is, it was higgledy-piggledy, that holiday. So we went all over the place. So yeah, I'm a fan of higgledy-piggledy. I think working in creative industries, the messiness of processes is quite fun. It can be frustrating, but a lot of fun. As long as it's got some structure and an outcome. But yeah, I really like the messiness of creativity.
That's fabulous. We'll have to have a lexicon at the end of the broadcast to make sure that listeners around the world understand what higgledy-piggledy means.
Higgledy-piggledy, yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. I always just thought it was a word from a nursery rhyme, but that's great. So, okay, this is our last. Again, just plowing through our speed round as quickly as we possibly can. Our final speed round question, April: is behavioral science something that just works in some countries but not in others?
I mean, I would say behavioral science, it's going to work on anyone as long as they're human, right? I mean, I think there will be cultural differences for sure. And, we've only just started to touch the tip of the iceberg with that at Cowry. But yeah, I'd say there's definitely nuances, but it's kind of the beauty of it is in these kind of semi-universalities, if you will.
Right,
okay.
perfect.
Okay, Jez.
I think it works in all countries, but different in all countries. Some of the work we've done with some of the big tech companies has identified some really interesting and quite stereotypical findings. So I think in France, Italy, Spain, in UK, we're quite happy to buy things without reading terms and conditions. But in Germany, if you don't have enough terms and conditions, then they won't buy the product. Yeah. Right. So I think ambiguity. I think we're happy with that. I think in the more laissez-faire, whereas maybe more Teutonic. But that's been borne out by the research. We're only looking at the behavioural sort of features and yeah. So I think everyone's the same with some differences. It would be my roundabout way of answering that question.
Well, and of course, the reason that I ask is because one of the things that we love about Ripple, the big effects of small behavior changes in business, is the fact that it's completely international. You've internationalized the narrative in a way that's really clear that you've got an underlying message that this isn't just something for a specific city, a specific country, a specific class of industry. How is it that you was there? I guess I should just check. Was that an underlying mission that you wanted to be explicit about in writing the book?
Yeah, I think when we started to stress test and probe the use of behavioral science, so maybe 2 or 3 years after Nudge was written, the application, we had this amazing opportunity to do it in different places around the world. So I'm not so sure that the objective was let's see if this works in different markets. It was more about how does it work in different markets, and let's see what in different environments where it can be applied. And I think that's the genius, but maybe kind of the difficulty of maybe why behavioral science hasn't grown as quickly, certainly as I would have thought, which is that it can apply to lots and lots and lots and lots of different things. So applying a focus to generate some momentum, I think hasn't helped. And I think in those early days, we used to have a line which said, if your problem involves people, then we can help. If it's a clock, we're not very good. And which was neat. It was neat, but it just doesn't help you start to build momentum. And I think working with April and the team, we're very much focused now on business, and then all about employee and customer experience. So we can make an impact there. We know we can do lots of other things, but that's where we go. So I think it was more out of curiosity rather than by design, the international flavour. But I think after 10 years, looking back and looking at all the research around weird markets, for sure, we're really looking to see. We're linked in with the Basara Centre, Nick Owsley in Central Sub-Saharan Africa, David Parrott is in South Africa, Sonia Adam, and Vishal Darrell in Australia, New Zealand, you guys in the States. We need to build this community up and start sharing this stuff, and we're really keen to do that.
Yeah. So, April, why don't you give us an overview of the book for the listeners as they are hearing about it for maybe the first time? What is Ripple? I mean, Tim outlined the title, but obviously you guys set out to do something here, and give us the 30,000 foot overview.
All right, yeah. So, I mean, Ripple is the book that kind of wasn't out there when I was doing my postgraduate study in behavior change. So, me and my classmates were all just we were just yearning for examples of how all of these amazing insights from behavioral science had been applied in the real world, and also in the private sector. So many of us were interested in the world of business, but there wasn't really this wealth of case studies out there, and you can kind of understand why people in the private sector maybe aren't so transparent about how they're using behavioral science. If you've got competitive edge because of this amazing thing that you're using, you might not want to share it with your competitors. So what Ripple does is it lifts the lid on Jez's decade of experience of applying behavioral science in the world of business, and it sets out to kind of demystify how it's done. So it gives you this practical toolkit for how to go about applying behavioral science in your role. And it doesn't matter if you're not the CEO of your business. It doesn't matter. You can be any level, and you can start applying nudges to help you work better, and also to make the business more successful. So it kind of takes you on a journey around the world, as we touched on, with all of these case studies and stories to inspire you, and hopefully once you're inspired, then tell you how to go about doing it.
Yeah, I think the case studies are really what drew me in, right? Understanding the science behind those case studies. I think you guys done a really nice job, but there's these stories. You're telling these stories of real businesses or real governments with real problems, and the way that you are applying behavioral science in order to look at those problems, but then also come up with solutions for them. So is there a favorite? I mean, you talk about, everything from water in France versus England, the types of water you drink to obesity in Mexico. Is there a favorite story? And maybe both of you have different ones. So I'll ask April first. Is there a favorite story or example that you have from the book?
I think my favorite story comes at the very end of the book. So chapter 14. So it kind of brings together all of the tips that we've kind of outlined in all the chapters before, and it kind of gives you this end-to-end case study of how we applied behavioral science to have these amazing impacts on behavior. And the chapter's called "Preventing Fools with Pink Walls." So it's a really, really counterintuitive story, all about how we went onto this construction site in London, so beside the River Thames, and it's quite a gritty environment. And needless to say, the guys on site were a little bit dubious that these psychologists were coming in and suggesting that we paint the walls of their canteen pink. So that is essentially what we did. So sometimes, they were cutting corners. They were trying to get the job done a little bit quicker, and they weren't always behaving in really safe ways. So it's really important for these construction businesses that they've got these squeaky clean health and safety records. And so that's why they got us involved. They thought, well, what if we could use behavioral science to give us the edge on our competitors? So we came in, and one of the things is that it's a very male environment, as you'd imagine, on these construction sites. So often the young guys had pretty high testosterone, and they were kind of taking risks because of this. And the older guys kind of had this attitude of, well, it's never happened to me. I'm safe because I know exactly what I'm doing. So we implemented these three interventions, but the one that's the most attention grabbing is the painting the walls of their canteen pink. And yeah, it's quite sweet. I think a lot of the guys they got quite fond of the pink walls, and I think the construction company have rolled them out across all of their sites. nationwide now. So
That's good.
Oh, that's all right. Fantastic.
And what was the effect? What was the measured effect? Jez, tell us what's the outcome of pink walls?
Yeah, I mean, we had three interventions that all ran at the same time. So we had pink walls, a reward scheme, which we re-engineered to reward good behaviour rather than penalise bad behaviour, and then we changed the scripting of a particular interaction of the employees. But as April said, Pippa, who was one of our psychologists, to avoid the Hawthorne effect, we had to send her up to do observational work. So, I mean, I did all the tests. I did all the health and safety training. I went on site, and as I've got older, I've got vertigo. But it was on the 28th floor of a building overlooking the River Thames. It was really quite high, and you went into this workplace. It was dangerous, you know. It was, and but Pippa was like fine, and so we positioned her as like a well-being expert. And as she walked around the floor, unbeknownst to the people working, she had two clickers. One was to measure observations on poor behaviours for working at height, and another one was material movement. So it avoided the Hawthorne effect. And she did that for 4 weeks, every day at different hours of the day on different floors to essentially give us the data set we wanted to. And then for 12 weeks, so it was like a 16-week period, we measured, and then we normalized the data for things like, you know, if there was loads of people working at height one day, obviously that would disproportionately influence one way or the other. So we normalized the data, and there was this minus 82% working at height, I think it's minus 93% for material movement, and the P scores were, I think, 1 in 69, and then the other one was above 1 in 4,000. So
wow.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, one of the things that we captured the imagination and piqued the interest with the drunk tank pink and Baker Miller pink, and but we really don't know which of the different interventions work the hardest, and pure hardcore behavioral science say that's a fundamental flaw in the behavioral design, and we play it back to say, actually, we'd had this conversation with the client that says we're going to re-engineer a reward scheme that already exists. We're going to re-script a conversation that already exists. And instead of you painting them white, we're going to paint them pink. So the cost wasn't that huge. Because what we're looking for is behavior change. We're not looking to prove whether a behavioral principle works or not. And if we can replicate this model across all of our sites, which we've done the business case work on, if it does work, then that's great. We'll do all of these three things together. And otherwise, we would have had to try and do how do you do a randomized control trial on a construction site? I mean, this is like the biggest building in South London on the River Thames. I mean, you can't find any other place in the world that quite like that. So yes, I think that was the measurement. And the Hawthorne effect was real. So what we found was that if you walked around as a safety expert looking at measurement, what the guys had sort of told us kind of in between meetings was they actually have a code. So you know, Kurt and Tim, if you were the health and safety guys on a construction site, you'd walk around the corner and they shout Kilimanjaro, and that is their code for health and safety. You're coming around the corner. Can you do everything right?
Wow.
And then as soon as you go off site, then they revert back to the norm, which is cutting corners. Now, that wasn't on this site. I have to stress, this wasn't on the site that we were working on, but that was kind of like the cultural phenomena that existed within these types of workers. So yeah, the site we were working on was for Shell, and it was the Shell headquarters. So the health and safety standards had to be at the highest level, if not the best in the world. And that's why they wanted behavioral safety. They really felt that behavioral science could bring that extra piece, which it certainly did.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point that, you know, when you look at, we talk with researchers, we talk with academics all the time, and they're always looking to isolate what are the dependent variables and the various aspects of this. And yet sometimes when you're working with businesses, which Tim and I both do, they don't care. I mean, if I'm talking to a CEO of an organization, he doesn't care which of those three interventions. I mean, to a certain degree, he might, but you know, for the most part, he doesn't really care if it was the changing of the incentives, if it was painting the walls pink. He just cares, or she cares, that it is making an impact on the bottom line. And I think sometimes we get in our high horse and as researchers, and we forget that. And I think it's one of the interesting pieces. And I'm going to just quote from the book, because this is one of the things that I found really powerful. And it's where you're talking about, you know, how do you get business people who may not be interested or even have a clue about behavioral science, saying that, yeah, this is something we should do. And you said the first step, and I quote here, the first step in getting people to acknowledge the power of behavioral science is to illuminate their own psychological biases and for them to experience the fallibilities of their brain firsthand. I just love that line because I think it's so true. And just help our listeners in expanding upon that.
I mean, I guess you both will be familiar with, trying to explain what you do at a party. And to someone who doesn't really get it, the best way to do it through lots of trial and error is to somehow show them that they're not immune to these biases and heuristics either. All of us have these mental shortcuts that we fall prey to, so what we do as a business at Cowry is we'll often begin our relationship with a client by giving them a really simple quiz, and it seems simple to them, but we've designed the quiz to catch them out. So every single question, we're kind of we're tapping into one of these shortcuts and biases that they might fall prey to. So the very first question is: a bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total, and the bat costs $1 more than a ball. How much does the ball cost? And so we go through them very quickly, which is a little bit cheeky. And then we reveal at the end that the person who thought they were the smartest person in the room has in fact got the least answers correct. And after that, it's pretty tricky to then deny that this stuff is real and that it affects all of us. And it provides a really good platform from which to kind of spring into our recommendations for their business.
I'm interested in just going down the whole rabbit hole of what's your favorite party trick with behavioral science, but I feel like that might be a little off topic. Maybe we'll do that after the recording. Okay, so I actually want to get back to something that April brought up earlier about the book, that it can apply to people across the organization, regardless of your job title or the role that you're doing. There can be some application to this, and it's a democratization, really, of one aspect of the democratization of the of behavioral science. And I wanted you guys just, if you could just take a minute to expand on this as to why you think that that's an important message to carry in the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an amazing toolkit. It almost feels unfair that there's this real imbalance, and we've got all of the knowledge, and these businesses don't have any of it, and it kind of seems unfair for us to hold those keys and ask them to ask for our help every time they want to solve a problem. So something that's really important to us, when we were writing Ripple, but also as a business, is to teach all of our clients to start using this stuff themselves. And it doesn't take one day. It takes a period of months, hand holding, to get them to a stage where they can start to apply it themselves. But yeah, it doesn't have to be the most senior person in an organization who, from the top down, is saying behavioral science is a really important thing for us to focus on. I think what we've found going into businesses is that you actually need someone who's a little bit closer to the coalface, who really understands the problems, who becomes almost a bit of an evangelist for behavioral science in the business, and can then kind of work their way around the organization to kind of drive change from the bottom up. And so that's why it's really important for us to empower people at all different levels in the organization to start applying this stuff in their daily role. And it's really gratifying for us to see our clients start nudging us in emails to try and get us to do things quicker for them. Yeah. That's when we know.
Jez, I wanted to get your feedback on that as well.
I think on a more practical level and a more human level, I think early in my kind of applied behavioral science career, I fell into that trap, which I think a lot of people do and hold dear to their hearts, which is, I want to be the cleverest person in the room. I want to be intellectually superior and hold like the insights. And what's, I don't know, it seems like sort of a paradox that often the insights, once you boil them down, are often very, very simple and easy to understand. So people talk about reciprocity, which is a really hard word to say. So if you've never heard that word before, you always say it wrong, we find, which undermines your credibility quickly. Essentially, it's like, I do something for you, so therefore you do something for me. It's like, it's not the hardest thing. Yeah, we can dress that up, and I think Cialdini does an amazing job of kind of, but I think other academics sometimes interpret it and try and make it something that's not. So I think that's the first thing, that these are human insights that humans understand, that they might not understand that they're going on in their own mind some of the time. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing, which is critical, which is if you don't translate the insights into usable assets, often when you look to intervene and start to look to change behavior, essentially your device, your design is often people delivering that. So what you've got to do is explain why it's important, what the ethics are behind what we're doing, that's leading to a good outcome for the citizen or the customer, and also for the company, and those two things that aren't mutually exclusive. But they have to deliver it. So it's never been more relevant for me when we work in contact centres and service centres, that often you find there's different cohorts of people with different levels of academic levels. And ultimately, these are the guys and girls that are delivering the intervention. We mentioned the construction site early. So I think, you can look really, really clever. You can make it complicated, but then you're going to end up with a null result for your design of your intervention. And this is kind of like I feel really passionate about it, that I think behavioral scientists make for really bad behavioral designers. And they're really surprised when some of their interventions don't work because they look really good in a paper. And you go, it just looks rubbish, And I think we've got 5 behavioral designers at Cowry who are all psychologists, but are really passionate about design. And we feed in stimulus and strategy and concepts, and they really bring them to life in a way that design people do, design thinkers do. And for me, that's it. I mean, I'll give you an example. I once did some work, we mentioned in the book, we talk about obesity, but I remember being on a literature review within the government in the UK, and there was a literature review done around all these interventions around obesity. And they come up, one of the interventions was a cartoon characters for vegetables, and there's all these like fun guys and lots of stuff, and they put this cartoon out, and it didn't work. And they were going, it's got everything in it. It's got all the right models. It's got all the right frameworks. It's got all the right psychological principles. And I was going, but it looks like 1974 Hanna-Barbera, right? And this is like Toy Story was at number 3, I think. It was on Toy Story 3, and the kids are like, where's Woody? Now for maybe slightly older people like me, it would have been really retro and kitsch, and we would have loved it, the Hanna-Barbera, but it was just, the design of the final intervention was so poor, all the behavioral science in the world wasn't going to help it out. And I think that is the critical point that we're really pushing into, that we want to essentially have a real respect for design. And it is about the colours, the shapes, the words, how things feel. It's not just about the science. Yeah, I'm not surprised that a lot of people want to appear clever on paper, but actually democratizing the insights and making things more design and fluent is really important.
Yeah, and we've also talked with people who are applying this and the researchers, and the applications that some of the researchers are done in a lab that's very controlled setting, that has very specific pieces, and is again searching for that one minute little aspect of what they're doing. And then when you take that and you try to generalize that out into the general workplace, you have so many other contextual aspects that are going on that either it gets lost or it doesn't have the same impact. And I think oftentimes it's really important to understand that, but we also have to understand these interventions that we're doing, that we're designing. To your point, you can't have a cartoon that looks like it's crap and from 1970 in a world in 2020. That just doesn't cut it. And the fact that we are living in a very complex, convoluted world that doesn't always allow us to be able to spend 30 seconds to focus on something. We only have a second or two. And so you have to you have to adjust for that. And I'm not sure if everybody always does that. I want to go back. There's two pieces I want to go back to. So just talking about how, April, you were talking this idea of, bringing this back into the workplace and various different things. And one of the aspects of the book that I enjoyed was this do-it-yourself aspect. And so I just want to point out for our readers that it's within each chapter, and it's not just one point, it's a multitude of points. I forget how many actually you have in there, but you have this whole do-it-yourself kit that takes some of these principles that you've identified, summarizes them down into a paragraph or two, maybe a little bit more, and offers some really clean insights for people to use. So I think your point of education, I wanted to point that out from the book. And then Jez, you talked a thing about ethics. And I'd like to get your thoughts on ethics, because I think it is one of the bigger pieces that we, as behavioral scientists, as behavioral designers, as applied behavioral scientists, however you want to call us, need to take into account. And I think it's some of the bigger concerns that some people have out there. They're going, oh, you are just manipulating us with your interventions. What's your take on that?
A really good question, and I love this question. Yeah, so I love to be incredibly transparent, and as the field develops, it's important that we sort of listen to the interpretations of kind of the forefathers. So I think Cass Sunstein has been amazing at outlining what this looks like. He had a very elegant line about, the art of nudging in itself is not unethical, but in the hands of a poor practitioner, it can be. And that's true of medicine, of law, of finance, it's of a lot of things. So I think that's so for sure, it can be used in ways which lead to an asymmetry in favor of those people designing those experiences. But that's not our start point. It's so funny. We look in the world of business and how businesses interact with people. They're so badly designed. There's so much work to be done. Just making that like easy, more frictionless, more fluent. To even get to that point where you have to get to that point. Like I think we could do it for like another good 10 years, and so that's kind of like there's just a panacea of opportunity to make really badly or ill thought of these experiences into things that are fairly reasonable, and we all know what they are. So I think that's the first point. Being a little bit more serious, when we started to look at what factors we thought were the most important in customer decision making, we went to the regulators, because we're very, very fortunate, and you guys in the States are too, where you've got people that are sitting within government, are setting out regulatory frameworks for how you use behavioral science in practice. So that's where we started. So our fundamental is the factors we use tend to be the ones that tend to be most influential, and we have those baked in as kind of our start point. And so appropriate uses of defaults and inappropriate uses of defaults, and being aware of those. The second one is making sure that the values of your company are aligned with the way that this stuff should be used. So we have three values. We're ambitious, and what we mean by that is we're ambitious for the growth of behavioral science worldwide, because we do think the world's pretty badly designed. Care. So we really do care, because we are dealing with people's decision making, and it has certain outcomes and consequences. And then integrity. So we want to hold our heads high, and believe that we're acting within the social and ethical constraints of the communities in which we operate in. So that's the second one. And then the third one would be, you have to have a code of ethics. And we've done an audit, and we can't find, and please tell us if it's the case, but we've got our ethical framework on our website. So if people want to come in and have a look at our ethical framework, it's there to see. And we talk about a lot of the things that Cass talked about making sure that options aren't limited and people can choose otherwise. So avoiding that sludge and phishing that Robert Schiller would often talk about. And so, yeah, we talk about it. I mean, we were talking about it just before we came on the call about when we're working with clients, that we call out, unknowingly sometimes, if a business is looks to try and do something which might be, actually we can get a conversion rate up here, and we'll call it out to say, yes, you can, but it has these consequences and we're not comfortable with that. Yeah, it's very, very close to our hearts, but we're very, very transparent. And I mean, April, I don't know if you want to build on it. That it's something we really sort of revel in. We're quite proud of the work we do. I'm very happy for people to open the bonnet, because we have these debates ourselves ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a conversation, like Jez says, that we have with clients a lot too. And so, I mean, we could do one training course for a big finance company and then say kind of, off you go ahead and design interventions and nudges to your heart's content. But we know that, like, as Jez said, if you just know the principles, but you're not fully aware of all of the unintended consequences that you could be triggering and all these things, then it could be a bit of a loaded gun in the wrong hands. So, I mean, it's a kind of a nurturing relationship where we're there on hand to kind of advise when they're starting to kind of do it themselves, and it's something that we want to embed in our training too, to kind of make people aware of all of the kind of the nudges, but also all of the sludge that's out there. Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite things to do is spotting sludge, especially on the internet. There's a lot of dodgy UX out there to try and get you to click somewhere that you might not want to click.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We care deeply about the ethical application, and it just it's so great in visiting your website to see your very vocal pronouncement of this is what we believe in and this is how we operate our business. That's really cool.
Thank you.
Also, in writing a book, you have to do a lot of reflection. You had to dig deep into things, and I'm wondering if both of you could reflect on what do you think is or some of the greatest behavioral interventions, most impactful behavioral interventions, as you were going back and pulling things from your experience.
The key learning for me was kind of building on this theme around behavioral science in a lab in a box isn't the same as behavioral science in the real world, and making sure you've got the ecosystem and the relationships to make things come to life. And in the book we talk about it's my favorite ever idea. It wasn't my idea, it was Dan's, and but we were trying to get essentially women in Thailand to utilize this new product from one of the big FMCG brands, and it was a product that essentially made hand washing a lot easier. So when you're rinsing out, in Thailand, it takes usually about 3 hours to wash the clothes. You've got 3 buckets, and this particular product allowed you to rinse out the I suppose the comfort, the sort of smelling agent, the softening agent quicker. So you didn't have all that manual sort of labor. So it would have saved about half an hour of these ladies' time. In that culture, they did a lot of the washing, and then that could be better time spent with their family. But because the product looked the same, it was sold on the same shops, in the same shelves, in the same packaging, and was just smaller, and customers were told that they didn't need to do as much effort. The bizarre thing was the women bought the product, but they actually just rinsed 3 times anyway. So it was kind of crazy. So we did this workshop, and we couldn't go to Thailand in this instance, but we kind of brought it in house and had this really strange experience where we were all hand washing in the basement of a fancy hotel in London with the team from Thailand came over. It was just more effective that way. It was kind of crazy. And yeah, I mean, I think April talks about it in the book, that at one point it was hilarious that Rory was on his hands and knees in a women's toilet with his sleeves rolled up, washing clothes with this particular product. It was quite a moment. And
that was great. That was a great image, by the way. That was so vivid to me.
It was so funny. And but it was interesting. But the workshop wasn't going the way that we wanted it to, and we had this idea prepared, and it was this. It was essentially a bucket that had these I suppose design features that made, if the product essentially had greater efficacy, we needed to demonstrate that it required slightly more effort for it to work. So the effort reward heuristic, like the MyKeer effect. So I think you've heard Rory talk about red and blue stripes in toothpaste drives effort reward heuristic, and the MyKeer effect is well known. And so we wanted to say, actually, if we add some more technicality to the washing process, make it more specific and precise, then the efficacy of the product could be borne out, and the women will tell themselves they only need to wash once because they've been very specific about how much water is in the bucket. They're going to have to release some of the water at a certain point on milliliters. It's got ripples on the side. We called it ripple release technology on the side of this bucket. So we had to create a bucket And we were in an advertising agency, right? So we made TV films. That we were like, how'd you create a bucket? So we kind of went out into like the relationships we had, and this is genuinely what happened. We got a costing to get a CAD design, which was really expensive for this particular bucket, and then we costed to go to China to get the minimum plastic run for these buckets, and the buckets cost, I kid you not, they were something like £15,000 each for a plastic bucket. This is for a plastic bucket. So I mean, we were getting paid more than that for the consultancy, thank goodness, but it wasn't a hugely amount more. So that was the first thing. So the second thing was we then said, why don't we kind of just modify a bucket? So we tried to get some guys to modify a bucket, and because plastic's malleable, but you can see when you've been malleable with it, we kind of went down, and it would have been like £3,000 per bucket to get a product that was just about passable, but you could still see where the tap had been stuck on and the ripples weren't really quite right and all that sort of stuff. And even the idea is genius, but we just didn't have design thinking at a product level at that time within our capabilities. And for me, that was a key thing that I felt maybe sitting in an advertising agency isn't necessarily the best place always for behavioral design, and actually building a network of people that can do things digitally but also things physically was a real jump off point. It was I mean, I kid you not, we did try and sell the £15,000 bucket, but it didn't wash. Yeah. And it is my favorite line in the book. So April, I don't know if you remember the line in the book, which was, this. I mean, the kid you not. This is my favorite line in the book that April wrote.
What was it? We realised we couldn't make a bucket unless we had bucket loads of cash.
Bucket loads of cash. Here we go. So it says. So here it goes. It goes, despite a successful workshop, insightful analysis of the behavioral problem, and an interesting idea which everyone believed in, there was a missing link. Nobody in the room knew how to make a bucket unless they had bucket loads of cash.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's my favorite line. It's so good.
Poetry.
April, what about you? What kind of observations do you come away? How do you feel a little bit smarter about behavioral science after compiling all this information?
Do you know what I think? One of the most important things that we've kind of learnt time and time again is that it's that very first project that you do that can sometimes be the simplest one as well. So that time when you apply behavioral science for the very first time within a business, it can have the biggest effect on how successful the business is going to be applying behavioral science, because it can be sometimes one of the simplest interventions that you do, and it can sometimes seem a bit boring, so a lot of our pilots are going in and helping the guys in contact centers to tweak some of the words they're saying to have better outcomes for their customers and also help them enjoy their jobs more. And it's not nearly as sexy as designing a whole new bucket or creating a hand stamp that changes hand washing behavior or painting a wall pink. But, getting that first proof point, it can have a really, really big impact on the bigger things that they can do down the line. It's kind of a key to unlock the potential in the organization. And it's something that we talk about in chapter 7. We talk about, how do you start scaling something like behavioral science across a whole entire organization? And we talk about the proofing ladder. So there are these different rungs on a ladder that you have to systematically climb in order to be able to leverage behavioral science at scale in an organization and unlock the kind of full potential of it. And the very first step on that ladder is doing a pilot. And it can be something really simple, and it might not be all that attention grabbing or newsworthy, but it can unlock some really amazing opportunities further down the line.
April, do you think that's because it's a proof of concept of behavioral science in and of itself, so you're getting leadership on board with it? Is it because maybe it's the low-hanging fruit because the company hasn't done anything, and this is like, oh, super simple intervention here, and we can have a big impact? Is it some combination of that, or is it something totally different?
So tell you what I think it is. I think it's kind of the next stage on from what we were talking about earlier, the way you've got to bring behavioral science to life for people on an individual level. Just like people will say, well, it's all very well saying that stuff applies to other people, but it doesn't apply to me. The same things happen at a collective level for a business. They say, well, it might work in that company, but it's definitely not going to work for us. So you get that little proof point, and then suddenly they realize the potential for their business.
That's my favorite client line. No. My people are different. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about music.
Jez loves to talk about music too. Jez loves to personally progress my historical music education. Before I was born.
Well, Tim will be there with you. So I give him grief about, he listened to a band after 1978. So.
Oh man, Jez, you and I, when we have a chance to get together and be in the same place in the same pub and have a pint together, we're gonna talk deep music. What I would like to start with though is writing a book takes a lot of work, and you work a lot with clients where you're having to write and think. Do you listen to music while you do work? And I'm interested in both of your thoughts about that.
For me, music is quite essential for my work. Especially if you're in an open plan office, which is wonderful for extroverts to collaborate and stuff, but not so great for introverts like me. I sometimes need to kind of block out the surrounding noise in order to focus and get stuff done. But yeah, even if I'm just if I was plugging away at the writing at home, I'll put on some house music is my weapon of choice. I like a 4 on the floor kick drum to kind of keep me focused.
Wow. Okay, we'll come back to that. Jez, how about you?
I've got 3 teenage boys, and they like the phenomena of listening to music in the background as they work. And it's an intense debate in our house. And after being in creative industries, I've seen that work. It's been part of the fabric. I think for me personally, I use music. I think everyone's stuck. I don't know about you, Tim, but the music you listen to when you're sort of 18 to 21, it stays with you. And what I found was, it might be maybe a little bit too deep, I know, but I think it's true, which is whenever I listen to music, it does take me back to that time of my life, and you're open to it, new influences, you're learning about new things, you're quite open-minded, and so I think often I find if I'm listening to music, it takes me back to that time where I was freer of quite a lot of the influences and the complications of everyday life. And so I grew up in Manchester, and there's a big Manchester scene at that time, but it takes me back to kind of a more, I suppose, clearer thought, more pure thinking, as opposed to where I am now, which is the spinner of many plates, and occasionally drop one, and which isn't so helpful. So I think using music as a device to get you to a place of clear thought has been really good, but I can't write and listen to music at the same time. I find that particularly difficult.
I think that's really interesting what you said, Jed. I think I'm fascinated by how music and also smells are just they're amazing triggers for almost time travel and kind of triggering nostalgia.
Yeah,
they go right to the reptilian part of our brains, then bypass a lot of the prefrontal cortex aspects of it. So when that happens, but music, we asked this question, actually, we're working with a researcher just to get some anecdotal, because Tim has been asking this question for our 150 plus guests now. And so it's been really interesting to hear people's responses. And there's been a split. There are people who can listen and definitely do listen to music when they work or they write. And there are definitely people who do not. So, but April, so you do listen when you do it, but house music typically doesn't have a lot of words in it. Can you listen to music that has words in it and write? That's another delineation that we've seen as some of this.
Yeah, the more confusion in there, the better for me. It's kind of, and I think So I'm lucky enough that one of my colleagues from my master's works with us at Cowry too, and she likes to tell stories of how I'd be in the library writing an essay, and I can't help it. I kind of dance at the same time, which is really embarrassing, and I think that I'm not doing it.
How in the world can you be so engaged in the music that you're moving your body and able to stay focused on the task at hand?
It could be part of that principle of flow, kind of getting you into that state. I kind of, when I'm listening to music and writing, I lose track of kind of space and time and get into that flow state. I wonder whether for some people it helps their flow and for some people it hinders their flow.
And yet, Jez, you prefer complete silence?
Yeah, I mean, I think all these comparisons are really good. I think one in our family is half of the family are owls. They love late dark nights, and half the family are larks. And I've got two sisters. One's an ex-doctor and one is a current teacher. And we were blessed with waking up at about 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning with absolutely crystal clear thought and purity of thought. And I always remember when I'm doing pitch work, when in my advertising career, often you'd have this kind of percolation overnight, and then wham, at 5 o'clock, a strategy could be written. And it's much to my, I love it, but my team hate it because they look at their emails and there is a 3 minute past 5 email. And I do make sure I go, I'm not expecting a response at 3 minutes past 5. So, surely it can wait. So yes, I think, for me, that's that. But I think music is such a powerful thing. And my wife, is similar, I think, but my children, the boys definitely love to have, music that I just don't understand, but that's ever the twain. I pretend I do,
Jez pretends that he's down with drill music and
I mean, I was trying to, because I don't know if you find it, Tim, but they sort of listen to Stormzy, and then drill is kind of like this derivative form, as I understand it, from grime. And but I was listening to Public Enemy, and it's it'll take a million to take us down, and Nation to Millions gets down. And I was like, this is amazing. Public Enemy were just political. They were out there. Everything had meaning. It was different, and they were like, this is very different. I'm like, no, it's the same. Exactly. It's just
Well, the neuroscience is pretty. You mentioned 18 to 21. I think I think Steve Levitt did some work on the neuroscience side of this, and for boys it's 13 to 18, and for girls it's more 16 to 22 or so. Broad generalization, right? Very, very, very broad. But those songs get imprinted on our brains. They make they make an imprint that remains with us, that whenever we hear that song, exactly as you're describing, Jez, it takes us back, because that listening to the song again today takes us back to the very first occasion that we heard it. In a really good way.
Or a use case. I was chatting to Zeba, who's our head of consulting, and she's a little bit older than April. And I was talking about on your first date when you're trying to get to first, second, and third base. And in the UK there was a particular song and an artist. There was an artist called Sade, and I don't know if you remember Sade. She had this song "Smooth Operator," and if you were trying to get a little bit familiar with your partner, then Smooth Operator was a good song to get to off first base for sure. And I'm not so sure I was particularly smooth, but the music might have helped.
I'm interested, Tim, in what you said there about the age bracket happening slightly later for women than for men, because it isn't, most of the developmental milestones, they're girls hitting them before boys because their prefrontal cortex develops a bit quicker.
Yeah, it is.
Do they suggest why?
I don't remember. I actually don't remember, but I'll be happy to send you a link. The book is Our Brain on Music, and it's a tremendous work of neuroscience and behavioral science integrated with music.
It is interesting though, Jez. I have a teenage boy myself and a 10-year-old daughter, and so it was really interesting because they loved my music when they were younger. And now that they're getting to this age where it is, they're having their own ideas and own things, and I try to get them and going, but you guys love this stuff, and they're going, no, it's like that's boring.
They still like Hamilton, though, right?
But Hamilton wasn't mine. I mean, Hamilton was theirs that they brought in, and my son is big into some. I don't even know what kind of rap that I sit there and I go, but here's some Public Enemy, and they're like going. This is like 80s stuff. What are you talking? It's like big cross sign up. They don't want to. They don't want to touch me. It's like, come on,
this is Chuck D.
Flavor Flav, come on! He's a big clock around his neck. Why wouldn't you love that? Well, April and Jez, thank you. This has been illuminating and really fun. And again, we will. For listeners, go out, get Ripple. It's a great read, easy read, but has some really great insights on it. And we'll all the information and contact stuff will be in the show notes. So look that up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you, Tim and Kurt.
Welcome to our grooving session, where Tim and I groove on what we learned from our conversation with Jez and April, have a free-flowing discussion, and talk about whatever else comes into our applied behavioral science brains.
I love that. Applied behavioral science.
Well, that's what their book is really about. It's not this theoretical tome. It is about applying behavioral science in the real frickin' world, with real problems, with real people, not some college students that getting paid, minimum wage to come in and do some experiments. Not that that's a bad thing.
Not a bad thing. It's a great way of.
Not a bad thing.
What I love about what researchers can do in a lab is to isolate a specific element of a behavioral function or intervention, and be able to call that out and say, this is the thing that's instrumental in making something work or not work. Whereas in a business world, pretty much we're often just left with, wow, there's a lot of noise in the environment. We tried this, and guess what? We had this kind of effect, but we can't pin all of the behavior change just on that one intervention. That's the challenge, I think.
Right. And this is the work that we do, right? You and I do this work with our clients, and we're living in a very noisy world that has a lot of inputs, a lot of confounding variables. And the fact of the matter is that our clients don't really care if it is a aspect of loss aversion, or if it is an aspect of choice architecture, or an aspect of the framing of the message. What they care about at the end is, are we changing the behaviors that we set out to do? Now, applying behavioral science into that, right, bringing that research in, is our job to be able to go into them and say, we think these will move the needle more so because of these aspects of this. And that's what I think Jez and April are doing in this book, is they're saying, look, we're moving the needle and we're doing these interventions, but it's not just because we want to try crazy things, because it's based on real science that's there. And again, pink walls, perfect example of this. Why would you ever want to go in and paint your walls pink? But we know that pink has this calming effect and a different aspect of how people respond to that color. And so let's try it in an application that is safety focused.
Yeah. And it worked.
And it worked. Yep. And so is that the only thing that influenced that? We don't know.
Right.
But the construction firm doesn't care. The construction firm is looking, look, we're keeping people safer. And if we're keeping people safer because it's pink walls or because of some other element that is there, we're keeping people safer.
It reminds me of a project that I did with a global oil firm that when they have plants, they do this, what they call a turnaround. And in 24 hours, they completely shut down the plant, clean things that are never cleaned, and then bring it back online. And it's extremely dangerous that people can lose their lives in these turnarounds, these 24-hour projects. And we proposed the idea of just trying recognition. What if we could actually recognize and then use social proof that, hey, Team 27 down in this particular part of the plant has successfully completed this without any errors and without any injuries, and just by sharing that in real time as the plant was going through this 24-hour. And guess what? They emerged 100% safe, no injuries, no OSHA infractions, those kinds of things. So something as simple as recognition ended up helping. So we have experienced this, and the clients really don't care how we get there. To a large degree, they just care about just getting the results, right? They just want answers, as right. You said.
So what did you find interesting besides it's the applied part of this?
Well, gosh, I mean, the applied part just dominates everything, right?
What aspect of the applied part do you then want to discuss more?
Well, could we spend just a minute on the quiz that Jez and April developed that they give clients when they come in to sort of agitate their client's brain to get them off of the idea that, of course, everything that I do is pretty perfect, and I'm not really subject to those biases and mental shortcuts. So that doesn't really apply to me. And April even said that they developed the quiz in part to kind of catch out the clients. And so my first thought was, I love challenging a client's thoughts around this, because all of us, me included, have the belief that everything that I do and say is perfectly rational, of course, or that I can rationalize it if I wasn't being rational. And so I've used optical illusions as an analog for cognitive illusions, and that has been for me a softer way of getting to what I think is the same point, rather than just kind of pushing somebody with a quiz to find out whether or not they can answer a question correctly, so to speak. But I know that you've had a different approach on this.
Well, I don't know if I've had a different approach. I use the illusions a lot because I think that they work. But I would be very interested in pushing this, because I do think that sometimes trying to get business people interested in why do we even use behavioral science is they don't see a value in the behavioral science. And so sometimes you just have to knock people on the side of the head to get them to realize, look, we are all influenced by these biases and heuristics that we have in ways that we don't understand and don't acknowledge, and you don't do it either. And sometimes it takes that, wow, I thought I would have done this differently, to have that happen. And again, we've talked about this multiple times. Your client who was the cash culture, and you had done that work with Dan Ariely to show something different. You want to explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a project that I did with Dan, and it was a global telecommunications firm, global 100 telecommunications firm. And we went through 16 of their call centers, and we picked out 4, couple that were top performing and a couple that were poor performing, and used them to decide whether to test the efficacy of non-monetary rewards in a culture that had already been using cash rewards, and we used similar amounts of cash as they had been used. And so we designed a system or a test so that two of the call centers would get more cash than they normally got in the same value of the non-monetary awards that we gave the other two call centers. And what we found was that by a long margin, the people in the non-monetary rewards, then I'm talking about things like binoculars and umbrellas and crock pots and slow cookers and things like that. But those people didn't know exactly what the value of it was. So we didn't promote it as this is a $60 slow cooker. It was just, here's a slow cooker as a reward. And those people in the non-monetary condition outperformed the cash group by about 43%. It was a significant change.
Significant, not 5%, not 10%, 43%.
Yeah.
In objectivable measures that were quantifiable
And agreed upon with the client up front. But when Dan and I presented this to the client, there was a long pause at the end of all the results. And I remember the woman who was in charge of the call center, she said, so maybe you didn't get this, but we're a cash culture.
So they had no intention of changing, even though the evidence was so powerful, saying that these non-monetary rewards were performing much better than the cash rewards that they were already using.
Yeah. And because they had agreed to do it, we thought that they would be open to the results. And I think that was an error in our own thinking.
All right. So if we think about this, right, the idea that Jez and April bring up of having this upfront quiz to say, here are our own biases being highlighted, is there, if you would have done that in advance, maybe it could have highlighted some of these aspects for this person, maybe not. But again, thinking through the ways that we have to get people to look at things through a behavioral science lens sometimes requires us to use behavioral science on them, right?
Well, April brought up the proofing ladder, right? This idea that there's this incremental approach to just getting a little bit of learning and a little bit of comfort, and then you move to the next level up, and then you get a little bit more comfort, a little more learning, a little more experience. And I don't think we did a good job of doing that. I think that to a large degree we failed. We didn't get them to really express their goals for what they wanted or what they were willing to do.
Or to figure out a way to get them past the status quo and to say, look, you have to think back and try to analyze this, go, what happened? Why was this person so adamant that even given these fantastic financial and performance results, they were unwilling to try that? Did they think it would be too hard? Was there going to be pushback? Other different things. So what are those aspects? But again, just getting people to move beyond that initial gut reaction, that system one thinking on this sometimes is difficult. And that proofing ladder, I think, is really interesting. I mean, you and I, we're working with a large cable communications company. And we did a short 9-series internal podcast for them about behavioral science, where we did 9 episodes on different behavioral science pieces, where we interviewed managers and leaders and employees from the company and used that as part of this. But now that was the initial piece, and they saw the value in that. And now we're looking at doing a larger intervention that is potentially training their leaders and getting them on some human, bringing a more human-centric approach to leadership inside of the organization based on behavioral science principles that we know work.
Yeah, it's a great example, Kurt, that we're taking a more incremental approach to building the relationship with this client, and it's probably going to be more successful as a result of it, as compared to the project.
Yeah,
absolutely. Kurt, what else got your attention?
Well, I think there's one of the big pieces of this is a book that is really showing these case studies and how the applied side of this gets put into practice. And it's almost this do-it-yourself and this democratization of behavioral science.
Yeah.
The idea of it shouldn't be held by a small series of outside consultants and experts, that really behavioral science should be integrated into human resources, sales, UX, marketing, all of these aspects and fields within an organization. And I thought they did a really nice job of talking about that.
Yeah. Isn't one of the goals, I don't remember who it was that I had the conversation with, but we're talking about the future of behavioral science. And maybe it was Michael Halsworth. And I think he kind of intimated that an ideal future would be behavioral science doesn't exist, that it's just completely integrated into all of our life, that we're aware of it, that we're thinking about it, that we apply it at work and at home.
Right. So that part of your training in getting a human resources degree in college, it involves understanding these behavioral science principles that apply to workers. Part of your marketing degree is having this behavioral science aspect of how do you influence, your consumers in an ethical way. And Jez and April talk about this is, look, we're here, and the goal of the book for them is to teach all of our clients to start using the stuff themselves.
Yeah.
So it's giving them the tools and the knowledge to be able to do that. And I think it's one of the things that we like to do too, which is why I think we get along so well with those guys.
And it's also okay. I think at some point, Jez talked about sort of dealing with sort of the standard bag of tricks, and that's an okay thing. I think about a conversation we had with Adam Hansen, who is the VP of Innovation at Ideas to Go, and he's got this innovation sessions, and they just start with the basics.
Yeah.
From a behavioral science perspective, they're just working with confirmation bias and negativity bias and really fundamental stuff. But part of the reason they're so fundamental is because they apply to just about everybody in some situation. And specifically in the innovation work that he does, I think it's a really cool. I think it's okay to just pull out the standard bag of tricks. We don't always have to be plumbing the greatest science in every situation, as long as we're getting results.
Right. And the piece that I felt was really insightful in this, and I was really glad that Jez opened up, is this idea of being the cleverest person in the room.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes that's really, it's a big high for people. I mean, I know for myself, I get that too, right? Where you're talking about these concepts that people hadn't heard before, and they're getting excited about it, and you're showing the results of this pilot that you did, and people are going, wow, and you're saying, yeah, and you're getting all these accolades because it's you. And that cleverest person in the room really is one of these things that we just have to get rid of. We have to be able to say, look, I would like to say that behavioral science is rocket science, but it's really not. It's really some pretty simple, basic human drives that may not be readily apparent at the surface, but once you just get to that really basic, as you said, those basic knowledge pieces, they apply across the board. Now, again, context matters.
Yeah.
And sometimes this is where having experts is, I think, important, is being able to come in and say, well, loss aversion worked there, so why didn't it work here? Well, you have a different context and different things, and this is how it gets interpreted in these different situations. And having more experience, I think, can help in doing that. That being said, it also doesn't preclude the idea of just applying some of these basic principles and maybe doing some experiments with those inside your own organization. You don't need to have an expert to do it.
At the same time, experts will still need to exist, because I love the analogy of thinking about using a toilet compared to building a toilet. Like the idea of designing a toilet is a hell of a lot more complicated than just using a toilet.
So are you saying that this is all a bunch of shit and we're trying to flush it? What toilet example? Tim, toilet example.
Just if you look at a toilet, you think this is so simple. Of course, anybody could design it, but designing a toilet is actually pretty damn complicated.
Okay, I will agree with you there.
And
all right.
So using a toilet or looking at it and saying I could design that is, we're really missing out on the complexity that actually goes into it. At the same time, if you had some basic understanding about water flow and gravity and some things like that, you might be able to come up with your own, and there could be a democratization. Well, this is all analogous to the idea that maybe with some basic understanding of behavioral science, you could just be a corporate practitioner and go out and apply it and design things that are not harmful and not unethical and do good work and improve the quality of your corporate culture or the efficacy of your sales teams or the power of your marketing tools, all in good ways if you had some basic understanding of behavioral science. That's all I'm saying.
I think that is a fantastic statement and I applaud it. And I think with that, I think we can end this, and people hang around because we have a bonus track coming up.
Hey Groovers, this is Tim with your bonus track and groove idea from our discussion with Jez and April about their new book, Ripple. To summarize, we talked about how the book intends to demystify and democratize the application of behavioral science by making it more accessible to the masses. We also talked about the purposeful integration of ethical conversations into our work with clients, and all agreed that we'd have all had clients that were, well, let's just say less than desirable to work with from time to time. That said, democratizing a set of tools in their nascent form and lacking true universalism is biting off one hell of a big chew. It's honorable and we support their goals, and at the same time, we urge caution to those who might want to go rogue with loss aversion. Lastly, we found the idea of proofing ladder a good one for lots of applications. Successful businesses are wont to status quo, even though they're asking for new ideas, new, fresh ideas. Well, Kurt and I have found that the best fresh and new ideas are the ones that bear modest similarity to the old ones. So the proofing ladder allows the journey to truly new, fresh ideas to be incremental. And that's probably the best way to go. For your groove idea for the week, here's something to consider. If you're in a job where you feel that you'd love to try out some behavioral science intervention on your company, but don't have the power to do it, give us a ring. Send us a note. Drop us a line. We'd be happy to talk through some of the clever ways that you might be able to work covertly and ethically to bring some behavioral science into your workplace. Thanks for listening, and we hope you leave us a review before you go on to the next episode. Now we hope you go and find your groove this week.